So back in June, when I picked up my car and hit the highway for a chill drive, I wanted to use autopilot, and I looked down at the futuristic yoke and saw this lit up haptic button that has the symbol for cruise control and generally means autopilot, and I pressed it with my thumb and nothing happened. So my first mystery, why is there a useless light on the yoke? Well, if we go to the owner's manual, we go to the section entitled Overview of Steering Yoke Buttons, we'll see that number 6 is the button I tried to hit. And the description for number 6 says, identifier that is always illuminated to indicate that the right scroll wheel can be used with cruise control. Okay, I have questions. For instance, why is there no light to indicate that this scroll wheel can be used for other things like audio? And by the way, I looked it up, and with traffic-aware cruise control, there is no legal requirement that that light exists to indicate cruise control. And if we go back and look at the description, notice that this section for line 6 is so much longer than everything else, and kind of seems like a kid who's using way too many words to make up an excuse for something silly he did. Oh, and when I finally got this thing on the bench, I noticed that when you press the cruise control light, it does kind of act like a button, so that's pretty interesting, right? So what's the deal? Why is this thing not a button, but kind of a button? Well, I think it turns out that Tesla learned a little too late that haptics are a terrible way to control anything on a car, and especially bad when it might lead to something called sudden unintended acceleration, which is just a fancy way to say the car takes off when the driver didn't intend for it to do anything. And so I think what happened was Tesla put this on here, and then they're like, oh crap, we should not have used haptics for cruise control or autopilot. I guess we'll use the thumb wheel. And so that's what they did. They ended up moving everything to the thumb wheel. Which leads us to mystery number 2. Why does the right side thumb wheel only do one thing? Well, I'm talking about this, by the way. This is the right side thumb wheel. On the Model 3 and the Y, you can press it like a button and it's voice control, or you can push it left or right and it changes the follow distance. But on the Plaid, it only does one thing, and that's engage cruise control. And that's because this thumb wheel was never really intended to be a cruise control button. It was, lesser important controls on the other cars. And now you have to nerf it because you don't want somebody to use the left or right directionals and do something wrong and accidentally engage cruise control. And let's just say that mistakes were made. It's pretty obvious in hindsight that some of this wasn't very well thought out, and it's just not a very effective control mechanism, and it's largely a marketing gimmick. And don't get me wrong, I mean, obviously I bought one. I think the 2020 and before Model S look great. I think the new one looks great, but they look pretty similar. And they needed something to make it stand out. So the yoke is that thing, and it's a marketing gimmick. But it's a very effective marketing gimmick, right? I mean, this is instantly recognizable when you see a photo of the interior that this is one of the new cars. And one of the things I hear from people is, but Ryan, I'm used to the yoke and it works great for 99% of driving. And my response is usually, cool, wheel works pretty well for 100% of driving. And it's interesting to me, I think there are people that definitely love the yoke, but why do people really, really love the yoke? I think it comes down to two things. One, it makes them feel special, right? It's something different and unique on the car that you just can't get on other cars. And that makes people feel good about it. But also, number 2 is they don't have a choice, right? Like if you go buy this car right now, there's no option for a wheel. So it doesn't matter. You're getting the yoke, and your choice is either regret buying a very expensive car or decide that you love the yoke and it's the greatest thing. Or you're indifferent to it, whatever. But bonus, there's a reason there'll never be a round wheel. If you remember this render of the round wheel version of this, it already didn't have stalks, right? And so the reason I don't think you'll ever see this, or maybe you'll see it around the time that they release Witcher for the car, is because it doesn't have any inherent aesthetic advantage that people can point to and go, well, they sacrificed this for visibility or whatever. It's just a round wheel, but it has the terrible, awful, atrocious haptic controls on it, and nobody's gonna like that. And so by sticking with the yoke, they can say, well, I mean, this is the future of driving. Like, obviously, when you're in autopilot and full self-driving in the future, the wheel won't even matter. And I guess to sum it up, I don't not hate the yoke. I just decided to go a different direction. In fact, if Tesla had shipped the car with stalks plus the yoke, I think it would have been a lot better. I think that combination's actually pretty good, and I drove that way for quite a while. When I initially did the project to add stalks, I was kind of concerned that if I adjusted the steering column all the way in, you know, it might hit, the stalks might hit on the dash or something. They don't even come close. Like, there's plenty of room, and it's a mechanical limit. Like, there is no issue whatsoever with adding stalks to this car. So I kind of wish they had just done that from the start. I think stalks plus the yoke is actually a pretty decent control mechanism. But, you know, I obviously put a wheel on my car, and now that I've done that, I prefer it a lot. Like, I had planned to drive around with the yoke and stalks, but once I got the wheel on there, I just really, really, really enjoyed driving the car a lot more. And so I'm not going to put the yoke back on as my daily driver at all at this point. And before I go, I want to answer a few viewer questions. You know, we got a few things in the mailbag. So the first question from literally everyone is, will you sell me your yoke? So thanks again for writing that in. And the answer is no. Please stop asking. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.